In this lesson, we will also graph hyperbolas, but they will now be centered at the point h, k. So again, this is just a good reference for you to look back on as we are working through this today. I'm looking at the same idea as I did before, finding my a squared value and my b squared value right away. And of course, I'm going to use that to find my c value. A is 3, b is of course the square root of 7. To find my c value, I'm going to take a squared plus b squared. So that gives me that c squared is 16, which means c is 4. So there's my a, b, and c values. Now, in this case, the center is not 0, 0. We're looking at the -4 and the +2, which means it's not -4 and +2, but it's +4 and -2. So just as before, we expect there to be a negative. So this -4 means that it was actually 4 that we subtracted. This +2 means we actually subtracted a -2. So 4, -2 is the center. From that point, I'm going to use the a and the b values. So I'm going to go 3 units on the x-axis, so 3 units in each direction. I'm going to go radical 7, which is about 2.6 units in the y direction. And that's where I'm going to make my little dotted line box. And then to draw in the asymptotes, again, it's going to go through the center and through the corners of that box. Again, much easier to do if you're on paper and pencil. So that's the box, and now of course I need to find the foci using that c value. Now, just as I did before, I know I'm going to be moving in the x direction, so I'm starting at the point 4, -2, and on the x, I'm going to take the x plus and minus 4, plus and minus the c value. So that means 4 plus 4, -2, and 4 minus 4, -2, which gives me the point 8, -2, and 0, -2. So 8, which is actually off my graph, -2, and 0, -2. And I've got my center, I've got my foci. My vertices were these 2 points here, which was of course taking my 4, -2 and adding 3, so x plus or minus 3, which was 7, -2, and 1, -2. So there's my vertices. I'll go ahead and graph it, and then we'll look at the equations of the asymptotes. So again, to graph it, we're looking at going through the vertex and using the asymptotes as a guide. I cut myself a little bit short on this side of my graph, but you get the idea of what the hyperbola would look like. To find the equations of the asymptotes, because the x came first, we're looking at y minus k equals plus or minus b over a x minus h. So in this case, we would have y minus -2, which is y plus 2, equals plus or minus, again, b over a, so radical 7 over 3, and then x minus h, so x minus 4. Those would be the equations of the asymptotes. Here's one for you to try on your own. So press pause, graph the hyperbola, and then press play to check your work. Again, we're going to start by identifying the center. The center is h, k, so that would be the opposite of 1, which is -1, 2. So -1, 2 is the center. The foci I can only find once I find my c value, so let's find a squared and b squared first. So a squared is 5, which means a is radical 5. B squared is 4, which means B is 2. C squared is 5 plus 4, which gives me C squared is 9 and C is 3. So the foci would be adding and subtracting 3 from the y value. So we have -1 to +3 and -1 to -3. Again, that would be the foci, which gives me -1, 5 and -1, -1. So -1, 5 and -1, -1. Those are foci. Vertices are found by adding and subtracting the a value from, in this case, the y value. So the vertices, I would be taking -1 plus, or sorry, -1 comma 2 plus radical 5 and -1 comma 2 minus radical 5, which is all well and good, except that of course I need to know what the decimal equivalent of that is. And the decimal equivalent of the square root of 5 is about 2.2. So this is about -1 comma 2 plus 2.2, so 4.2, and -1 comma 2 minus 2.2, so -0.2. So let's plot those 2 points. So I have -1, 4.2, and -1, -0.2. Using that b value of 2, again, I can go 2 units in both directions, and that's going to give me my dotted line box. And then, of course, to draw in my asymptotes, I'm just going to, oops, that one was not a very good straight line. Use, hopefully, a ruler, go through the center and the endpoints of that box. Those would be my 2 asymptotes. To find the equations of those asymptotes, again, because the y comes first, I would be looking at y minus k equals plus or minus a over b x minus h, which means y minus 2 equals plus or minus radical 5 over 2 x plus 1. Those would be the equations of the dotted lines I just drew. So I have the center, I have the foci, I have the vertices, I have my equations, and now I just have to graph. And I'm going to graph again by hitting those vertices and using the asymptotes as a guide. You get the basic idea. So that is essentially what that hyperbola would look like.